Destiny as Poet, and I wrote this to my 15-year-old self. Exiting my mother's womb, umbilical cord severed, nourishment finalized. Born with brain chemical imbalance, serotonin and dopamine receptors firing. What to come of this newborn? A stab at carving out his identity. The middle name comes attached with a mission statement. Gill. Not like the anatomical attributes of a fish or Gilligan's Island. Not like the name of a small village in Iran, for I was not born a Muslim, despite calling many of them spirit brothers and sisters. For I am Gil, like the activist Gil Scott Heron. For I am also Gil, like the name of a tropical storm that gathers its momentum and swirls with the gale force winds of sandstorms and hurricanes. The revolution will not be televised. I am the weather pattern that no meteorologist can predict, that no would-be prophet could possibly foresee coming. Before I arrive, it might be best for you to batten down the hatches, perhaps construct fallout shelters, because rough weather is surely expected. Stock up on food, clothing, and other assorted supplies. Tend to the sick and the dying, and make sure to have auxiliary power available in case I cause a total blackout. As humans, we must prepare for difficulty and crisis. We must take precaution long before something detrimental occurs, before the bombs drop, before a plane's engine explodes, resulting in mass casualties, before a raging totalitarian zealot releases nuclear launch codes, before a smear campaign is conducted by partisan newspapers to tarnish someone truly honest, before the performer's microphone becomes unplugged and his voice is unable to carry, unlike my own. Before that tone-deaf producer decides to add auto-tune to a songbird who has the voice of a canary. Before humanity goes extinct from rising sea levels within the next 20 years. Before the world's population goes from 8 billion to 10 billion. My feet greet the shoreline and touch down upon pure sand. I become one with my element. Thank you. This one, I actually haven't titled it, but it was written in spirit of the midterm elections. A turn of the tide, eyes wide open, not stitched shut. Progressiveness wafts through the air, catapulting game-changing voices that must defy convention. Let us not set the country back 50 years, demanding reparations paid in full for former sins of corrupted generations. No corporations to sweeten the deal with persuasive promises. An acknowledgement that history can be rewritten and fates can intertwine, as elder bureaucrats are forced to resign as they fade into the ether. Historically, the pendulum has swung in either direction. No more time for convenient bipartisan compromise, making conciliatory agreements, because the atmosphere becomes a tense pressure cooker. Votes not going in vain. Incorrectly filled punch card ballots pile up, stacked to the heavens as an all-seeing God might observe such actions. The crack of a neo-Nazi's gun goes off, with bullet casings dropping to the floor as terrified would-be victims scatter. Emboldened by the provocations of a deranged manic leader, for he was once able to wage an all-out war on media. The same oligarchy-ridden strings pull that filter and disseminate our news, making it increasingly difficult to take ownership of one's own views. Let the blue wave flush out the crimson tide. Let liberally minded and ideals flourish while safeguards are erected to keep power and profiteering in check. As voter apathy experiences a 180-degree shift, as polling algorithms predict change is afoot for the first time in decades. Lotus flowers bloom in the desert sands. Petals photosynthesize nutrients. A nation experiences unity. I have one more. This one is actually featured in the anthology. I wrote it about a former friend of mine. I met him about 2010 or so. He was like a really incredible poet, and he decided to become a born-again Christian. And now he spends a lot of his time like preaching on subways and stuff, unfortunately. And we don't really talk anymore. But anyway, this one is called Step Stool Preacher. You single-handedly galvanized the crowd, waxing poetic about the second coming of Christ, invoking the damnation of the fire and brimstone mentality of the many evangelists before you. Hey, you preacher man with your demands, with your hands held high, not as a fist in fervent protestation, but as palms wide open. As I watched you, ever so closely, with your lavalier microphone pinned to your lapel, I had feared for the worst, lamenting that you were just too smart and self-aware to ever give in to narrow-minded religiosity. Much like the fallen angel Gabriel, who, in his descent to the underworld, burned up in the atmosphere with a thunderous hurtle. You and I, we came to blows over our incompatible beliefs that God was indeed a woman. She, a Nubian princess with a prominent afro and a witty spark, with a smile that would glisten for days. Hey, you preacher man, do you need that stool to convince yourself and others that you might not be a fool, believing that artificial elevation will give you more credibility? Or do you believe you are too cool for confrontation and that your motivation is rooted in idolatry of the man or woman ascended to the clouds? You used to idolize progressive intellectuals like Amiri Baraka and Ntozake Shangai. Rest in peace. Now it's 24/7 Pat Robertson and the megachurch pastors who bleed money as misers and overlords of their own inverted thinking. Years from now, I might see you on a cracked TV monitor with the reception hissing in a post-apocalyptic landscape that you and your cohorts predicted, going in and out of range like your inconsistent viewpoints, but still claiming to have the all-seeing powers of Nostradamus. Long after your mind might stagnate from only ever consuming biblical passages and nothing else, using your spongy, receptive brain to middling effect. You could have helped change the world positively, but instead, you parade around with your megaphone and that stool you clutch so tight like it's the aborted fetus you think you're defending. The crowd once again goes wild. The moment is captured and live streamed for all to see. You emerge with a black eye from someone you decided to antagonize. Your stool now broken and your hands now splintered as the little wood barbs impale you, much as they did the almighty God that you believe you're representing. As your legacy in the annals of history is fully cemented as just another dime a dozen lunatic stoking the flames. Thank you.
Thank you.